All right. Before we dive into the word, it is related to what we're going to talk about, but I do want to spend a few minutes kind of commenting on and highlighting some things that I've been noticing, the leaders we've noticed, and it's just how God's on the move. God's on the move. Yeah, some of you are excited about that. That's okay if the rest of you aren't, but I think you will be later. God's on the move, and he's been raising. I think of it as the water table. Remember the water table from your science class? It's the level underneath the surface under which the ground is saturated with water. That level and below, like you start digging, you hit the water table like you just hit mush, right? And in the spirit, I just see him raising the water table of like faith and community and stuff, so that we don't have to dig for it anymore. We don't have to dig as deep, or it's just above the ground already. And in the natural, that might be a swamp, but in the spirit, it's the earth is full of the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. And I just want to commend you on what you're doing there. I just noticed that this has had an effect on the things that we're doing and saying and believing as individuals and as a community. And I want to commend you for it. And I want to maybe comment on some of it. Maybe you've only seen a slice and you haven't seen all the things. And no, I haven't seen them all either, but I have gathered a few together of what the Lord's doing in our midst. I know that some of you are hearing the Lord speak to you in ways that you haven't heard before, like it's having sometimes a physical reaction, or just that thing that you, or whatever, it is that God normally speaks to you this way, or you normally think you're hearing his voice this way, but he's speaking to you in a different way, and you're experiencing that, and you're going, okay, I recognize you, Lord. I mean, God's faithfulness on the move is a big one. The elders, we had a fast, and then right after that, things started falling into place with where we're going. Things started coming up with the new church, and I know that right now we're still contending for something there, but we really, I haven't had to convince a lot of folks like, oh, this is what God wants for us. Last Tuesday we had prayer here for that, and guess what? It wasn't the elders' idea, and we were totally for it and behind it and wish we'd have thought of it. But what I'm saying is, it's not on us to think of everything, and it's awesome when anybody in the body goes, hey, I'm hearing this, let's do it, and we hear the witness of God and go, yeah, that's God asking us to do it through you, because guess what? He doesn't say everything's through us. And so here we were, those of us that could come, and those that couldn't come were praying at home, and just with a couple days' notice, we had Pastor John's, some folks from his church, and Pastor Rita and some folks from her church, and then our group, and here we are contending, instead of just rolling over and going, well, it must not be God's will because it didn't happen like easily without any effort. We're taking a page from the book of Nehemiah and saying, well, sometimes there's opposition and we got to contend for it. And I'm just, there's that. The testimonies last week from the folks that were here, I just see you guys more and more in your daily lives just following the leading of the Lord. And Valerie said she talked about it last weekend, but when she was giving her testimony, but when she was telling me, she said, I made some prophetic gift baskets for my relatives when they came. Do you guys realize that's kind of a peculiar thing to do? It's a God thing, but it does set us apart. I'm not sure that I've ever heard of a Muslim making a prophetic gift package, or of a Buddhist making a prophetic, or of an atheist making a prophetic. This has got, Jody decided to spend several hours talking to somebody on the phone. When they went to Phoenix, they said, let's get together with Charlie and Charlie Stubbs. And there's other examples. I'm not going to hit them all. But you're hearing the Lord as you're doing your daily things go, yeah, okay, let's do this while we're here, right? And I just think it's awesome. One thing that really, and I talked about it a little bit last week, really struck me was the interaction between the senders and the sent when we went to Mardi Gras. Because in the past, it just seemed like it's been kind of, in spite of it's not like we didn't want interaction, but it just felt like it was a little bit, disconnected, and we're trying to feed back information. But this time, it just felt so like, yeah, there was a lot of interact. We got words from folks that were here, sending us to us. I think we tried to do a better job of feeding things back, and the whole time, I felt empowered and prayed for and all this stuff from what you guys were doing, because we were just the tip of the iceberg, but what the real work is the prayer and all the stuff and the words and the encouragement that you guys were doing. Even when we were writing the prophetic cards, the Sunday before, this might be just me, but I think it's not just me, but we still might be wrong. But here's the feeling I've had in the past sometimes. It's like maybe it was like a little bit of a beatdown. Like in the past years when we've had, not everybody, but just sometimes I get this feeling like everybody's like, all right, they're asking me to do this and they're watching me, so I better put something down. And I just don't feel like I can hear the Lord really, but okay, I'll give it a shot and whatever. And I'm not saying everybody was like this. I'm not even sure I'm completely right about that. But it's just, I just noticed a completely different vibe from you guys that Sunday. Like everybody's like, yeah, everybody gets to play, okay. And we don't have to do this in isolation. And like I remember folks going, hey, to each other, hey, what was that verse that says this? And what's and people just talk. I mean, this is awesome. It was the body doing this together, hearing together in some cases, right? And writing things down. It was just, I just see God is on the move in our midst. And I just want to commend you for it. All these little body life things that are going on. Last week, you guys prayed for me for my throat and ear and I just, it was just I just had a great time. And I haven't said this to anyone, but there were some words that God's spoken to me about 13 years ago. I was trying to calculate it earlier. It's probably about 13 years ago, maybe 14, maybe 12. That you guys said some of those words again, and I just knew it was the Lord speaking to me, and I just felt really like loved. Like you guys are just really praying for me to feel better. I don't think Tony minds me sharing that he talked about some of the same thing. And I saw it even before we talked about it when he sent out his prayer request because he'd just been struggling with some depression. You guys responded, and sometimes I'm one of those guys. A lot of times I don't have time to maybe sit down right then and write something back, but I do say I'm praying, and I am praying. But several of you just actually wrote down something and said, "Here's what I'm praying for, Tony." Boom, and put it in there. Or I heard there was a person, I don't know who it was. Geez, a feather or something, or maybe it's a spit bubble. Anyway, a floater. I heard.
Seats are 6 feet away from.
That's right. The splash zone. And I have wait till I get going. I heard, I don't know who it was, but I heard someone even did a little bit more than just some prayer, like sent Tony something, to help encourage him.
With chocolate.
There you go, a little gift package, and so there's that, right? You've gone out of your way. We say we have to be willing to be inconvenienced, and sometimes that sounds like a word, like this is going to be a horrible burden. And it's not, sometimes it can be. Like I was totally wanting to do this, and God just stopped me and asked me to do that. Other times it's just out of your way. It's not something that you, if you just kept going on your way, you wouldn't do it, but it's just slightly out of your way, and sometimes it's a lot out of your way. But either time, you have a choice to say, I'm going to go out of my way or not. And you've been going out of your way. I've been hearing about how with this movie, Jesus Revolution, there's been several folks that are just kind of organic, not just families, but like people that weren't in the same nuclear family, going, hey, let's go watch this movie together, you know? It's just body life that wasn't only on Sunday, and that wasn't only in a moment of crisis. You know, we do that fairly well as a body as respond in crisis, and that's good and necessary and right. But it's also good that when everything's going great, we still stay connected. That when everything's going great, we still interact with each other, and that it's not all on a Sunday morning only, right? That we're a body, just like we're not just Christians on Sundays. We're not a fellowship and a group, a community of Jesus followers. That's what a church is. It's a community of Jesus followers that are trying to follow Jesus together. And we're that, not just on Sunday mornings. And I've just been seeing you guys are doing that. And you know, there's a lot of other little things I've heard, you know, prayers, people praying for each other, Sundays, other days, you know, reaching out, checking in with each other, and there's just all this stuff that's going on. And what I'm saying is I want you to notice it, and I want to commend you on it. And I know that not everybody has been having, you know, no issues this time either, right? Like I know some of you personal stories, and I know that just in a group this size, there's folks that are struggling with stuff, whether it's in their families, whether it's in their work. Sometimes it's something, you know, chronic that's been going on for a while, and sometimes it's something acute that just came up, but in the midst of that, you're still out there going, oh, God still wants to use me. God still wants me to do these things in spite of my circumstances. Following Him, you know, you're refusing to be neutralized by your circumstances. You're refusing to be kind of canceled out by the things that are happening. It's like you're acting as if you really believe that you're part of something bigger, and that God really wants to use you. That you're citizens of another kingdom, and it's not, you know, it's not Washington. The capital isn't Washington, D.C. or Ottawa or whatever. It's a city, a heavenly city, whose builder and architect is God, and you're looking forward to that, and you're living it out now. So in spite of circumstances, so well done. God is on the move. And my two purposes for, don't try to analyze it too much, like what's the reason, what, you know, or anything like that, overthink it. But I want you to notice that it's happening, and I want to just say, like, lean into it. Like when He's asking you to do more or to do something different, like cooperate with it, you know. I want to encourage you to keep it up, but to also increase. Like, don't just stay where you're at. Don't level off, but increase in what you're doing. As me and some friends at work would say, do it again harder. Do it more, you know. Go further up, go further in, lean into what He's doing. Just remember that it's not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord. So this isn't about us like, girl, I got to do this. You know, it's just the natural consequence that we're bearing fruit. But there are things you can do to resist, and there are things you can do to cooperate. And I see you guys cooperating, and I just want to say, good job, and keep doing that. Do that more, do that harder, do that stronger. Lean into what He's doing. Continue to listen to the Spirit. Let Him transform you, and His Spirit will guide us in this. And in this community life and in this growth together. All right? All right. It was worth spending some time to say that. Now, this is related to some of the things we've been talking about. We've been talking about with this sermon series about spiritual giftings, and community life and how to function in the revelatory giftings in a community. Right? Scott started it off with a few sermons a while back. We've talked about everybody gets to play, right? With old vineyard phrase of saying we all get to do it. Nobody's, not good enough, not ready enough, doesn't know enough, hasn't been a Christian long enough. There's none of that going on. Not only the pastor, only the ministry directors. There's none of that going on. Actually, God said this is for every believer, and we want to be not spectators but participants. We want to be contributors, not just consumers. We do benefit from God's life in us, from the encouragement of the body, but we also want to go and put back into that, and not just in our body, but those folks out there that need to hear the Lord or need to come to know Him better. And so Scott talked about that. He talked about spiritual authority and original authority and delegated authority and bringing heaven to earth. Remember the Bible Project video we watched, and Jesus. It actually reminds me of the verse that's been on my mind related to Mardi Gras. That when Peter's talking to Cornelius' household, and he says Jesus went about doing good and healing all who were oppressed of the devil because God was with him. It's that in that video where there's the sin world, and Jesus is going around creating, clean pockets of stuff, and that's us now, right? That's us bringing heaven to earth. We're His representatives now. We're that spot where heaven and earth meet because Jesus is in us, and so we're bringing heaven to earth where we go, and it's in everything we do. Like, it's not just at church; it's everywhere we go. And so we talked about that, the questions that have been, kind of at the forefront. Are you teachable, and are you jaded? Right? Are you willing to say, Lord, maybe there's something that I've known this for 20 years, but guess what? It was wrong. Somebody taught me the wrong thing. It wasn't their fault, or maybe it was, but it doesn't matter. It just happened. Maybe there's the best intentions, and I've been there. People taught me the wrong thing. They weren't trying to hurt me or deceive me. They just didn't know any better. Neither one of us did. But then later on, I found out. And so, am I willing to say, okay, well, maybe some things, even some sacred cows that I thought were for sure the thing, maybe they aren't the thing, right? And secondly, have I become jaded? Have I been thinking that this doesn't happen anymore, or this whatever? Have disappointments in the past related to this, now influenced what I'm doing now? And I think, from what I said earlier, I think I'm seeing a lot of movement in those questions from you guys in general. Maybe not every single person. I know that in a group this size, we're in different stages of the journey, but we're all getting there together as long as we're moving and in progression. Moving towards being teachable, towards letting, the Lord change our minds and heal us if we've been kind of jaded or hurt or disappointed by this sort of thing in the past. And so last time I said, and it's been a month. I was looking at the calendar. It's been exactly 28 days because we had the Mardi Gras and other things going on. So we started talking about community life, because if we're all doing this together, everybody gets to play, we all get the same spirit, we all get to do it, then, things are there's some group dynamics that happen when that's going on, right? Because it doesn't depend on anything, but if everybody gets to play, it depends on two things. One is God's power operating in your life. How many of you agree that that's like pretty limitless, like not an impediment, not something that's like, I don't know if that's going to work out, I don't know if He's powerful enough, strong enough. That's not an issue. Yeah, that's awesome. But the second thing is our willingness to follow what He's saying, to hear it, to listen, and do something about it, right? because he's not going to jump in and make us do anything. And he very much always wanted, from, read page 1 of your Bible, he always wanted to rule the earth through humans. And he isn't going back on that, even when we screwed it up. He isn't just... I've just noticed there's a lot of things that God, if they don't get done with God and humanity partnering, they just don't get done. Like God refuses to step in and do it himself. Really what happens is he finds somebody else that he can partner with. And I'll observe that salvation, which was all God, was still God becoming human. And we'll have more on that later. There's nothing we could do to save ourselves, but he did become human to do that. And so, yeah, God, our willingness, we call it surrender. That's the Christian word for our willingness to say, yes, Lord, I hear you. I'll do what you're asking me to do. What our level of surrender is and God's power, those are the two things. And the surrender thing, you just got to start somewhere, really. Like if you think you got to be 100% or 90% or 50% to get going, not really. I think we could probably think of lots of examples of that. God just wants you to start somewhere and then progress, and then keep going, right? Along obedience in the same direction, right? You start here, and here can be anywhere, but you started, and you obey, and you listen, and you do what he's asking you to do, and then you go, no, I don't want to do that. But then later on, you go, yeah, actually, I know I should. And sometimes we have these back and forths, but as long as we're progressing in that same direction. And so that's all it depends on. Everyone gets to play. And so we have this environment where we want to encourage everybody to experiment with their calling and their gifting, what God is showing you and teaching you and wanting you to do, and you get to figure it out and talk with others about it and hear and try it on and go, yeah, that worked, or man, no, maybe that didn't work, and adjust and we're free to learn and grow and practice and all that, all of us together in this group, and we're just a small group compared to some churches. We're not actually that small compared to an average church in the United States. But, I mean, just think of how much those interactions are multiplied the larger the group gets, is my point. Right? So there's that going on, and that's awesome, and it happens. But here's the thing. It can get messy. Right? If we're all practicing and experiment and growing and learning, there might be, some hurt feelings sometimes. There might be, something that I did or said that didn't mean to hurt anybody, but I didn't know what I was doing. It could be uncomfortable. It could be awkward. But it happened, and now what? Right? And a lot of times. A leader in the group or the group itself is we can't have too much of this. So we got to put some boundaries and controls on it. But the problem with that, historically, is, yes, there's things that, we should try to not hurt people, right? But we're all Christians. And if we're all Christians, we're already trying to do that, right? But what I was going to say is historically, these kind of controls or governing rules, even the best well-intentioned ones, most of the time end up kind of squashing that environment, especially as time goes on, because you add a little bit more. Well, we can't have that happen again. Let's add something to keep that from happening again. Oh, this awkward situation or these hurt feelings, let's add something to keep that from happening again. And over time, it just squashes that, and so it's incredibly difficult to have this free environment and potential for mess, but what do you do to try to help the mess be as little as possible or clean it up and all this stuff? You guys get what I'm saying? As a group, whether you've thought about it or not, that's what groups do, and leaders of groups or groups themselves, they kind of tend to want to avoid those things and try to, and it, even with the best intentions, though, it ends up like squashing that learning environment, that growth environment a little bit. And I want to observe, though, that Jesus didn't really do that a lot. You know, he didn't really put too many things on it. I've observed, if you read the Gospels, that he was okay with a certain level of like mess ups. I mean, think of the things that Peter was free to say to Jesus. Like, you know, Peter was probably more extroverted and all that, but I'm telling you, if there was an environment that it was kind of known and understood that you don't say that sort of thing to the rabbi, Peter would not have said it, or he'd have said it and got kicked out. That's it. You failed discipleship. And instead, he rebuked Jesus. He was smart enough to pull him aside, but he rebuked Jesus. He said, Jesus, this plan of yours of going to Jerusalem to die is whack. You're wrong. This is not what the scriptures say. They say that the Messiah is going to reign. And I believe you're the Messiah. So this dying plan is against the scriptures. I think that's the subtext of Peter rebuking Jesus over it. But Peter was free. My point is, Peter was free to say that. You know, James and John, one time, there's this city that they went to, in they're traveling, they're ministering, they're itinerant, you know, and they go into the city, and the city rejected them. It's like, we've heard about you, Jesus. We don't want any of you. And James and John were like, Jesus, we have an idea. These guys have rejected you. You're the Messiah. They should be punished. I've read in my Bible how sometimes God would punish cities like Sodom and Gomorrah, and they were doing the wrong thing. And so I have an idea. We'll do this for you, Jesus. You don't have to do it. We want to help you. James and I will call down fire from heaven on that city because they rejected you. We think that's the right thing to do. That's biblical and scriptural. And Jesus was like, yeah, sorry guys, you got that pretty wrong. He told them, you don't know what spirit you're of. Like you're thinking the wrong way. But my point is, they were free to say that. They were free to say that. Thank God that they said all those things, because then Jesus gets this chance to say something back, and now it's recorded for us to learn from. But Jesus told this parable about the wheat and the tares, and where everybody was like, look, these weeds are growing up amongst the wheat, and so we need to like chop this thing down. And in the parable, the owner of the field is very concerned that he'll lose some wheat. He was very concerned that he'll lose some wheat. And so he says, let's just let it all grow. And then we'll know what's the bad stuff to pick out. And think about what he does with the disciples. Think about how he treats you and me. It's not like the first time you mess up, cut it down. We might get some good with the bad, but at least we won't have the bad. Right? Cut down. We might get some wheat with the tares, but at least we won't have tares. No, he says, we'll see what grows in your heart, and then we'll be able to pick it out from the root, but we'll save all the good stuff. So, you guys get my point. That's how Jesus approached this thing about this environment where everybody gets to grow and learn and experiment. That's how Jesus approached it. And he had it in this community. He didn't have just one disciple, which is not a crazy idea. Like Elijah only had one disciple. Moses only had one guy after him. But Jesus said, no, it needs to be a community. And that's how he set it up. And that's how it is in the church today. And if you're kind of a loner or you don't like some of the folks that God's put in the community with you, because we're all adopted, so he didn't get to pick our brothers and sisters. God picked them. And, if you wish it was another way, well, it's not. And Jesus set it up that way, and I think he was really serious about it. He really meant it. It wasn't like a nice idea in case we want to do it. For example, and we're going to be talking about gifts and stuff in the coming weeks. That's where this is headed, obviously. And let's read some of the things that God says about the gifts. Let's put up Ephesians 4. It says to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ. Do you guys, anybody know what the context of that verse is? Anybody remember Ephesians 4? Take a guess.
He gave also prophet, pastors, teachers.
Right. That's the verse right before this one. He gave to some apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers, or shepherds and teachers. And it's to equip the saints. Who are is being a prophet or an evangelist or a teacher for me? Does it benefit me?
Yeah.
What's it primarily for? It's for the saints, for others. Yeah. 1 Corinthians 12:7. In Corinthians, the list of gifts. And right before he goes into that, he says this: to each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for what?
Good.
Common good. Is it just for my good? It's not a trick question. It's okay if you guys say that. No, it's not just for my good. Last one, Romans 12. There's 3 places that are kind of some lists of gifts and a little bit different, and somebody else is going to talk about that in some other day. But I just wanted to point out this. So we, the many, are one body in Christ and individually members of one another. And in that context, he goes on to talk about prophets and servants and teachers and exhorters and so on. And he says we're members of each other. And that's what this is for. That's the context. The context of the gifts is always that, 100% of the time. So the equipping and the edification that I need as an individual comes through the rest of the body. I'll use a body analogy. The nutrients I need come through the rest of the body. And I'm built up and grow and learn through gifts, but it's the gifts of the rest of the body, right? And read Corinthians 12, right? So each one through what every joint supplies, what every member supplies, we're all being built up, right? And so that's what's going on. And it doesn't mean that God doesn't speak to each one of us, right? And might tell us things to do or learn or hear or say. But I will say you're making a grave mistake if you think that that's all you need to grow and mature, is just whatever God tells you personally. And you're also making a grave mistake if you think that whatever he's telling you is just for you. Like sometimes there's a right time and maybe a not so right time to share something with someone, but it's for others too. So that's this community thing, right? And that's why I talked about honor and contempt last time, because if we're all supposed to receive from each other and give to each other, it's hard to receive from somebody I kind of don't have much respect for, have some disdain for. And it's okay if I'm openly cautious or cautiously open to receiving from anybody. But God's best thing is for me to actually honor everybody around me. That really positions me to receive the most, is when I hold you in high esteem and in high regard. It's okay to be lukewarm about it. At least you'll get something, but it's better to have that honor. And this is incredibly hard to do. I know it. Jesus knew it too, but he still asked us to do it, and he said, I'll actually empower you to do it. But it is hard because we're in this environment, and we're a family, and we're around each other all the time. And just like a nuclear family in the biological natural world, right? We see each other's good sides and bad sides. We're around each other a lot. That's where that saying familiarity breeds contempt comes from. But familiarity in the kingdom should breed honor, right? Because the more if I see your bad side, I should forgive it, and I should put on love to always see the best in you, right? And that's what he's asked us to do. That's what he's asked us to do. We've all, the Bible uses all these words to talk about, the bad stuff, like sin and transgression and iniquity. And sin basically means you've missed the mark. Like, here's the goal, here's the standard. I'm talking about the Hebrew definition and how it's used. Here's the goal, here's the standard. You've missed. You shot for it and you missed. Air ball, whatever, right? So that's that definition. When Paul, who is steeped in the Hebrew culture and scriptures, when he says all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, he says you were made for this glory, but you've sinned, which means you've missed the mark and you've fallen short. And so Jesus came along, and he was the perfect human that we were always trying to be but perpetually failing to be. And he showed us what it means to be truly human, right? What we've been is kind of subhuman in the sense of not the real human. I don't mean animals, but not what real humans were created to be in the garden, Adam and Eve. And Jesus came to show us what that really was supposed to look like. And so we're all being transformed, but the problem is there's this old man or old woman, the old self. And the thing is, he's we killed him and he's dead, but sometimes he rears his ugly head again. And the thing is, he looks just like me and has my same voice and haircut and is wearing the same clothes. But here's the question. When we see our old self in someone else, when I see their old self act out, do I recognize it's their old self, or do I confuse them with their new self and start saying, man, you're just immature, horrible person, whatever, you need a... Or do I say, I know that's the old you. Now, if I do something wrong and I sin, I'm not saying, that there's a heresy out there that goes like, well, it wasn't me, it was my old self, but it wasn't me that sinned. It was me. Yeah, but you get what I'm saying, that when the old self shows up, we have to have this grace that says, I know that wasn't the best you, the real you. I'm going to forgive that. I'm going to recognize that, and we're gonna move on from that. So that's how, in this environment where we're all having this familiarity and stuff, instead of disdain or contempt or disrespect, and I get that it's incredibly hard to do, but God is empowering us to do it, and He's calling us to do it, and we're able to do it through Him. We're able to create this environment where when I mess up, you go, Nate, your epidermis was showing. Your old self was showing. Pardon me, Nate. Your old self is showing. Could you tuck that back in? You came across a little harsh. You're right. It was the old me. Thanks for forgiving me. And maybe sometimes, this is for another sermon, you start We can, well, I won't get into it. We can help each other when there's patterns of our old self always shows up at certain times, and we can go, yeah, well, let's figure out what that is, so that quits happening. Not because I'm afraid you're going to hurt me or hurt around me, but just because that's God's will, is to get healed and get well. So yeah, I mean that's why Jesus, when he on the Sermon on the Mount, he's talking about not judging each other and stuff, is because we tend to think that only your old man ever shows up, mine doesn't, right? Like this, do not judge is like when Jesus with the plank and the speck and everything, he's saying humans, we have a tendency to go, okay, me and Jesus, we're over here, and we're right, and you're over there, and you're wrong. And really what Jesus is saying is, no, I'm over here by myself. You're both wrong. But we tend to see ourselves in a better light always. We tend to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt more than we do each other. And it's just human nature. But real human nature is to always give each other that benefit of the doubt, to always be forgiving, to always be loving. And so I want to close with this, and there'll be some homework in here. Colossians 3, Paul addresses some of this, and it's just such a beautiful passage. And so let's just read it, and then I'll tell you what your homework is. So, verse 12, put on then, as God's chosen ones, you're God's chosen ones, holy and beloved. Put on what? Compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, bearing with one another. Some translations say things like long-suffering. Doesn't that sound awesome? Bearing with one another. And if one has a complaint against another, if your old man is showing, forgiving each other. As the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. And above all these, what? Put on love. Put on love. Just pretend like you're putting on your favorite jacket. Put one arm in, put the other arm. Above all else, it's above your shirt or your undershirt or whatever. Put on love. Above kindness, humility, meekness, patience, forbearance, put on love. Which binds everything together in perfect harmony. There's some absolutes for you. It binds what things? Everything, all things. And how good is this harmony? It's pretty good. It's perfect. It's perfect. Next verse, please. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. We were called as one body to peace being the rule. Ruling in our hearts, ruling in the body. Peace. And be thankful. Verse 16, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom. It doesn't mean we don't have to have tough conversations sometimes. It doesn't mean we don't speak into each other's lives and hear from each other. We should do that. We should do it from a standpoint of having the word of Christ dwelling in us richly and in wisdom. Singing songs and hymns and psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your heart to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Isn't that a great few verses? mean, it just really says, it encapsulates body life. We're going to have to forgive. We might have to teach and admonish. Overall, put on love. So that's get your pens or your mental ink ready. That's Colossians 3:12-17. And what I would ask is you just read that once a day this next week. Maybe think about it a little bit too. What's God saying? It'll take you 60 seconds, 30 seconds to read it, a few minutes. I'm not asking for a lot, I hope you see. But I just really felt as I was preparing this that this is what I needed to ask you guys. That if you just read it once a week this week, once a day this week, God will do something in you. You'll learn what he wants, whatever it is. Whatever it is. Colossians 3:12-17. Okay.